All right, Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Let's talk once again about Brexit, but this one will be a very interesting conversation with Brexit because we have a very interesting statement from Donald Tusk, which was followed by a tweet, which he has since deleted, by the way. But I have a screenshot of the tweet. Here it is. I'm going to read it from you, and I'd like your comment after I read it. Quote from Donald Tusk. I've been wondering what that special place in hell looks like for those who promoted Brexit without even a sketch of a plan how to carry it out safely. Alexander, what do you think of Tusk's statement and tweet?
I think it was an outrageous statement. Can I say why? The simple reason why I think it was an outrageous statement is because it is so profoundly undemocratic and so profoundly contemptuous of the 17.5 million people in Britain who voted for Brexit. I mean, he appears to consider any plan to leave the European Union, any proposal to leave the European Union, any desire by anybody to leave the European Union as qualifying someone from hell, to be sent to hell. And the reaction in Britain, I should say, even amongst some people who are not too keen on Brexit, to this statement was incredibly negative. Theresa May has now come out and said that she found it unhelpful, which is that typical British understatement that you get from official Britain in situations like this sort. Other people have been speaking much more strongly about it, and I think that at a time when Brexit is still to some extent on a knife edge, with the votes in Parliament still uncertain, I think it has strengthened even further the determination of some people to push forward with Brexit and risk a no-deal Brexit or even embrace it. So I think it was a horrible thing to do, a bad thing to do, and I think it was ultimately a counterproductive thing to do. If his intention was to keep Britain connected to the European Union.
All right, let me read you Nigel Farage's response, which was really within minutes of Tusk's tweet. So Nigel Farage tweeted, after Brexit, we will be free of unelected, arrogant bullies like you and run our country. Sounds more like heaven to me. Classic Farage?
Classic Farage, and Farage the politician, because, of course, from his point of view, Tusk is manna from heaven. I mean, he's the gift who gives on giving. Tusk is, as Farage says, unelected. He talks in this way, in a way that will be seen as deeply insulting by lots of people in Britain. And here is Farage making use of that, throwing it back at Tusk, and doing so actually in Farage's way, in a typically witty way, which appeals to a lot of people in Britain here. So it's typical Farage, but I don't think one should underestimate the great anger a lot of people in Britain feel about these comments. I think they came at the worst possible moment, and in terms of the Brexit discussions. And I think that Farage obviously is using them to his advantage. But some people who might have been convinced by Theresa May to back a plan, or some people who might have even been convinced to, take steps to stop Brexit, might be rather less convinced now.
How does this change the dynamic, if it does change the dynamic between May and Tusk as they meet to try to hammer out some sort of compromise?
Right. Well, I've been sceptical about this idea of a compromise all along. I mean, if you remember, I think it was our last programme, I said that Theresa May's policy, as far as I could judge it, was to try and dial down the clock, go through the pretense of negotiating with the European Union, changes in the backstop. This is this thing that Britain can't leave the customs union without the European Union's agreement, so as not to compromise the position with the Irish border. She's been talking about negotiating some kind of deal on that, but I've always been sceptical that she really intended to do that. And in fact, she's now come back and said, just within the last couple of days, that the backstop will remain. So whatever kind of a negotiation she's looking for, whatever kind of negotiation she's doing, it isn't really going to change anything. I think Theresa May's plan all along has been to let the clock dial ever closer to the 29th of March, which is Brexit Day, scare Parliament into voting for her plan, as it is now, unamended, because of the fear of a no-deal Brexit on the 29th of March. What Donald Tusk has just done is that he has made so many people in Britain so angry that it is going to be more difficult for Theresa May to scare parliamentarians in London to vote for her plan, and I suspect it's going to make some of them more willing to risk a no-deal Brexit on the 29th of March. So he has undermined Theresa May. Mm-hmm.
What do you think this says about Tusk and the EU?
I think it shows how completely out of touch they are. I don't think they've ever really understood this referendum. I think that they can't really bring themselves to understand that there is a large popular feeling against the EU in many countries, including, by the way, Donald Tusk's Poland. I mean, that's moving also steadily in an anti-EU direction. And I think these people in Brussels, who are unelected, as Nigel Farage said, are becoming so cut off from popular sentiments that they're making these extraordinary comments, like the ones that Donald Tusk has made, letting the mask slip off the face, showing the underlying arrogance and disdain for democratic votes and democratic politics, which these unelected people have, and at the same time exposing their lack of understanding of the way in which the tide of history in Europe is currently moving.
And finally, Alexander, as a Cypriot, as a Greek, you know, I sit there and I look at Tusk's comment and I kind of say to myself, okay, these are how these guys in Brussels think of, you know, all of us peasants, all of us common people in Europe. You know, this is how they view us. Do you think people in Italy, people in Germany, Poland, you mentioned, Austria, all these countries, they look at a comment like Tusk's and they say, you know, this is just not working. These guys in Brussels, you know, they have no respect for our country, our culture, our heritage, who we are whatsoever.
I think they're increasingly saying that. I think they're becoming, people all over Europe are becoming increasingly angry. And the strongest expression of that anger are in the three countries which historically have dominated the EU: Britain, where a majority of the electorate, of the people who voted for Brexit; France, where a majority of the people support the Gilets jaunes, the Yellow Vest protests, which are continuing and which are now moving, I think, for the 13th week; and Germany, where we see the rise of the AfD. In the meantime, a country like Italy has been captured by what are essentially anti-EU parties, the Five Star Movement and the Northern League, and we've seen how the Italian government is now increasingly asserting itself, hosting the Yellow Vests in Rome, risking the anger of Paris, and in fact voting against EU recognition of the change of government of the Guaido in Venezuela. I think they did that actually more in order to assert themselves against the EU than because they're really interested in Venezuela. So I think that these actions by Tusk, these words of Tusk, show why people are angry, and these words of Tusk are going to make people even more angry. And of course, where we talk about Tusk, we can also talk about Emmanuel Macron, a very similar person, in my opinion, to Tusk. And of course, we see the same thing happening in Germany, where the German government is also now sliding in its support in Germany, and where there is the rise of the AfD.
And Macron himself, today there was news that France and Italy have their own little row being played out with the fact that, the Italian, I believe was it Italian minister or Italian ambassador met with the yellow vests. So, I mean, you can see the power dynamics and the very deep disagreements that these countries, these leaders have amongst themselves.
Yeah. Well, it's looking increasingly like the European disunion rather than the European Union. And the reason it is doing so is not ultimately because of the people of Europe, who I think generally wanted at one time to be, together in a certain kind of association with each other. It is because of the way in which people in Brussels have embraced this neoliberal, globalist, integrationist agenda, which they are trying to enforce on everyone else. And it's creating a backlash, and this row between Italy and Macron and the Macron government. One mustn't say France, because, as I've said, Macron doesn't speak for the whole of France. This row is another illustration of it.
Yeah, it's, the European Union just couldn't stop it. The free movement of people, the Schengen, all of that, they had to integrate it as deep and as far as they could.
Absolutely, and make it as undemocratic as they could, because one thing is absolutely clear: the kind of people who are making the decisions in Europe are not the people of Europe. It's not decided in a democratic way. And Tusk's comments about Brexit show that. I mean, the fact, as I said, that he talks about a place in hell for people who supported a Brexit policy that was supported by 17.5 million people in a legal referendum.
Yeah, I mean, I read that comment, and I'm not English, I'm not British, but I mean, I read that comment, and I was just like, you know what, just UK, grab your and just get the hell out of there.
Absolutely.
Hard Brexit, just get out.
That's exactly what Nigel Farage has said. And he said it in a rather more, shall we say, cheeky way than you.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. He's a much smarter man. All right. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below and click on that notifications bell to get notifications every time we push out a new video. And visit the Duran shop, pick up a t-shirt, help support the Duran. In the description box down below, you will find links to our PayPal and Patreon pages. Please donate to us. It really, really helps us out a lot. And of course, you can get a copy of this video in audio format. Follow us on iTunes and Soundcloud. And don't forget, go to theduran.com to see the articles that Alexander Mercouris is linking up to every day. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Thank you once again. Until next time, everybody, take care.